everyone. Can you hear me okay? So I'm Alexa. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about design research with you. Before I get started, everyone should have a folder or an envelope on their table. Do me a favor and do not open it yet. First, I want to introduce myself and explain my point of view about design research as a designer. I work at Moment, a digital product strategy and design consultancy in New York City, and our mission is to transform businesses through design. We partner with our clients to help them adapt to new technologies from a human angle, and we rely on research methods to guide us to the right solutions. At Moment, our design process looks a lot like this. We do tons of sketching and prototyping. It also looks a lot like this. They hate that I took this picture. We do tons of collaborative cross-practice iteration. And here we have people from Moment's core practices working through a concept. You'll notice that none of them has the title of researcher because we don't consider it as a separate role. At Moment, everyone on the team engages in research as part of the design process. Our designers use research methods to get new perspectives, understand how people work, how they organize and act, and to understand their mental models. We use methods to assess attitudes, gather expert opinions, and make sure that products are desirable and usable. Basically, we do whatever it takes to get a better understanding of what a product should be doing and how to make it better. At Moment, we like having research and strategy as an integrated part of the design roles because it keeps our teams nimble and reduces the risk of important insights getting lost in translation. This hybrid structure also empowers us to go out and get the information we need when we need it, and to integrate that perspective directly into the design and strategy that we're doing. While this works really well for us at Moment, we realize that this is not really the most common structure that's out there. A common alternative to the way that people work is having a researcher and a designer paired together on a project. Quick poll, who in the crowd is sort of partnering with someone or has research involved in their design process right now, but maybe wants to do it better? Okay. Another common structure, which is unfortunate, is that design is happening without research. How many people are in the situation where they're doing design and they feel like they don't have access to research, or it's not currently a part of their process, but they would like to make it part of their process? Okay, so a lot of hands in both categories, about 50-50. What we're going to talk about today is going to be helpful for all of you. So let's step back and talk about design research, particularly methods. So research methods provide different lenses to approach different types of design problems. Now, the tricky bit is that there's tons and tons of research methods out there. There's collection methods, analysis and synthesis methods, and communication methods. Now, becoming a good practitioner of these various types of methods is going to take more than the hour that we have today. So we're not going to talk about how to execute design research methods. Luckily, methods are, by definition, something that is learnable and well documented. So these are three of my favorite resources for brushing up on design methods. I'll post a link to these to our website as well as tweet it later. So feel free to check them out. You don't need to worry about scribbling down the names and the authors. Instead, I'm going to help you learn how to focus your research mission and choose the right methods for your project today. So back to this. What's inside? It is the shortest textbook ever. The textbook is a single sheet of paper. There's one for each of you in the envelopes. You can go ahead and open them now. As you're opening them, I'll just give a quick introduction. So with this tool, you should be able to have more confidence in choosing the research methods to assist you on your current project, your next project, and every project from here on out. So a quick illustrated table of contents for the textbook. Page 1, if you refer to page 1, we have research goals and missions for different stages in a product's life cycle. Also a worksheet, so you can think about how to apply it to your current project. On page 2, I've mapped some of my favorite methods for different phases of the product lifecycle. So hopefully with this tool, you'll be able to spend more time focusing on learning and executing these different methods, and less time trying to choose the right ones. Now, a very important thing to notice here is that I'm using the word product lifecycle. This is something that most of you probably haven't really thought about much before. It's sort of a new thing in the digital product world. So a product lifecycle is not to be confused with a project lifecycle. These are different things. So when I'm talking about a product lifecycle, I'm talking about how digital products are born, how they change over time, and how they die. I should clarify what I'm talking about when I say digital product, just so we're all on the same page. So not everything that lives on a screen is something I consider a digital product. In general, I'm not talking about read-only promotional sites. I'm not talking about your portfolio, as great as it might be. I don't consider that to be a digital product. So there's not a clear exchange of value being supported. It's not a tool. It's not transactional. However, what we're looking at here is actually one of Squarespace's portfolio templates. Now, Squarespace offers tools to designers, artists, and businesses to create and host their sites, and they make it easy. They offer this value in exchange for a reasonable monthly fee. There's a clear exchange of value happening. A value exchange doesn't necessarily need to mean that there's money involved, though, money changing hands directly like this. There are ad-supported products like news products, CNN for example, where the business gives news in exchange for page views from readers, and then CNN is able to monetize those page views with advertisers. Google Maps is another great example of a digital product where you get the value of never being lost again, and they get the value of a little bit of data. So there are lots of other different models, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. Let's get back to the product lifecycle. By introducing you to the product lifecycle, you will have better situational awareness of the goals on your project. So too often, I think that as designers, we get kind of hyper-focused on what we're doing today, what we're doing this week, this month, and we lose sight of the bigger picture of what it is that we're trying to do. Using the product lifecycle as a framework will help you select the best methods for the situation and give you more time to design. This framework is something that I've put together over a decade of experience in shaping research to help build better products. And this is the first time that I'm sharing it with you guys today, so this is brand new, fresh, original content. So I'm absolutely looking forward to people coming up and asking questions on the mic up here afterwards, and also having conversations and getting feedback from you afterwards on this. So the product lifecycle has 5 key phases. Typically, a project you're working on will only be focused in one of these 5 areas at a time. At each one of these phases, your client is going to have some different goals in mind. So if you've ever wondered why, the project you're working on now is so different from the last project you're working on, it could be because of this, the product lifecycle. So if a client is coming to you with minor release types of changes, and you're coming back to them with project plans or product ideas that are more in the major release update type of category, you're probably missing the mark. It's probably not going to turn out very well for you. So referring back to page 2 of your textbook, you can read across to get suggestions for the appropriate methods given the phase of the product lifecycle that you're operating in right now. You'll notice that each phase of the lifecycle also has 2 research goals listed: to generate ideas and to evaluate ideas. What do those mean? So I break research methods into these 2 basic categories. There are other ways that research experts classify methods that are equally valid, but for the purposes of design, I think that this is sort of the most dead simple way of getting ideas across. So generative methods focus outwardly on the world surrounding your product. They help you examine the context in which the product lives, and the findings should help you generate new ideas. Evaluative methods focus inwardly on the product that you're designing. They help you evaluate a design and understand what could be better. Simple enough, right? Generative research typically comes as a lead-in to the design process, so it should help you frame the opportunity and inspire your team. Then you design, and then you get a product. But there's the question of, is this thing any good? And that's where evaluative research methods come in. So for evaluative research to be effective, you'll typically want to have some time reserved to do some design refinement so that your research is effectively put to use in making the product better. And then you get a better product. But is this one any good? So at this point, you certainly could go back and do some more evaluative testing and refinement. But you want to avoid sort of this worst case scenario where as designers, it's really tempting to seek perfection. And you can get into this cycle of research paralysis where the product is never going live because you just keep testing and refining it. You don't want to do that. As a user-centered designer, I firmly believe that you want to get products out in the world where they can get in the hands of people, actually provide them some value, and it's okay if they're not perfect. You can refine them. That's part of the process. So what your process should actually look more like is this. So you should have a short generative phase. Could be as short as a few hours, a few days, maybe a few weeks. It will be longer if the domain that you're researching is more foreign to you or more specialized. Then you're going to bring evaluative methods into the design process. So instead of having it be really this either or, I'm either designing or evaluating, have evaluative processes as part of your design phase. Test early, test often. That's what that mantra is really meaning here. You want to increase the fidelity of your concepts as you iterate. So going from paper prototypes into mock-ups and so on, so that at the end your product is fairly well vetted in terms of how you think it's going to do in the world. Now you can bring this project approach into any phase of the product lifecycle. So I'm going to walk through each phase and share a short case study to help illuminate the points in your textbook. So let's look at the first phase, new product definition. These projects tend to be driven by business objectives. You are actively looking for opportunities to execute on. So the business objectives might be to increase revenue by 10% or expand services to Mexico. So really kind of vague and not quite sure from a designer's point of view what exactly that means. We're not talking about color palettes yet in any way, shape, or form. So you may not have had a project in this phase of the life cycle, but it's becoming more common to bring design thinking into these upfront processes, and that's a really good thing and an important thing. There are research methods and tools to equip you if you're acting in this part of the product life cycle. So some of the research missions that you should be focusing on when you're defining new products are what's changing in the space. Understand how people are being affected by changes in the industry, the competitive landscape, and what that means. So what does that change mean? As a designer, my goal at this point in the process is to connect the dots, create a future forecast, and define the opportunities and threats that matter based on the data collected. So with these things in mind, you can start to outline some opportunities, tell a story about what matters, and put some opportunities on the table. Once you have those ideas, you start to sort of ask, what problem does this idea solve, and for whom? Does it save people money, time? Does it relieve boredom? Does it inspire them? There are lots of different types of problems you can solve for people. So understanding the core value the idea offers to the target audience and their level of excitement around the idea is important. And then finally, should we pursue it? How many people will use it? How much are they likely to pay for it? What resources will be needed to get this off the ground? Let me share a quick example with you. So this past summer, I led a team on an exploratory project to define new opportunities in the media space. You may have noticed that there's a lot of disruptive change going on. So we did a lot of secondary research to understand some of the trends, and this perspective was a good foundation for diary studies and expert interviews that we conducted. People are dealing with too many peripherals, too many subscriptions, too many options. By complementing our secondary research with these real-life stories, we started to shape a more interesting picture. After collecting data, the tricky part is always finding out what it all means. So this can take some time to figure out. As a designer, your role in the process at this point is to find the story in the data and simplify the picture. One of the stories that we took from our research was looking at the content landscape, content lifecycle, how different players are involved to bring media to viewers. We found that in recent years, one of the biggest disruptors to the media ecosystem are retailers like Netflix, that give users access to content without also owning the distribution channel. This is sort of a new thing. So they're making a play based on improved user experience, and they're able to make headway because users are so displeased with the service that distributors are offering. So from this story, we believe that there is an opportunity for distributors to fight against the retailers by upping their game when it comes to user experience. We illustrated a vision concept where your phone replaces your remote and your cable box. You take your media with you, and you can fling content to the best screen available for watching. What problem does it solve? It solves a couple. It brings your media interface in line with their current expectations. It streamlines the hardware and media subscriptions you're dealing with, and simplifies the decision-making in the new world of too much choice. For the final question, should we pursue it? There are massive political obstacles to implementing something like this. However, we think that the market is enormous, and it would be worth modeling out for a distribution company with enough clout to pull it off. At the moment, it doesn't make sense for us to obviously embark on trying to get this launched and out there. Now, at first glance, now that we have a product opportunity in mind, let's talk about how we bring it to market. So, talking about a first release of a product, the minimum viable product, or MVP. At first glance, this is the most dreamy part of the product lifecycle for a lot of designers because you have a clean slate, fresh start. The world is full of hope. But getting a great MVP out into the world is really hard, and you need to be smart about it. You need to be focused, and you need to be fast. It's really helpful if the design team was involved in defining the opportunity in phase one, but really that's not always the case. So what kinds of research missions should you focus on while you're working towards a first release? How will it be differentiated? Recognize the killer features that deliver unique value, and then define a brand personality that fits. Next, how will people find out about it? I think it's important that you don't wait until the end to think about first use scenarios. Will people find it because it's promoted through existing offerings, through word of mouth, social networks? Or are you relying that people will stumble upon it in the hundreds of thousands of apps in the App Store? I think it's helpful to, as an exercise really early on, name the 3 most likely ways people will find out about your product and sketch them out. Do some quick sketches of key flows and scenarios, understanding what kinds of functionality are going to be important for discovery in this first release and getting critical mass built for your product and getting it off the ground. Once you have an idea of the product concept, you get into evaluating it, and the key question you should focus on is, does the design do what it should? The key value and differentiators should be really clear, and users should be able to successfully navigate key flows. Talking to people, doing user interviews, both to understand sort of the value testing side of things as well as usability testing, is a really good way to go to get feedback here. A fairly new product to most of our lives is Uber. Can't really see it on the screen there, sorry. While they were past their first release, I think they've done a great job of translating their value proposition into a tangible interface and brand. So I'm going to talk about them for a second for MVPs. Uber recognized a problem. People didn't enjoy their experiences with cabs and car services. They were hard to find, and people had anxiety about their safety and being overcharged by their drivers. From a value perspective, people valued a service that would be easy to find a car, comfortable to ride in, trusted driver, easy payment, and low price. This is sort of like the best of. You want all of these. If you plotted how well existing services were doing on each of these value offerings, you'd probably get something like this. It's not great. So Uber created a new kind of car service. They created a car service that reduced anxiety of finding a cab and made it fun. The cars are clean and comfortable. They drive safely. You have the driver's information on your phone so you can follow up if something goes wrong. And they blew away the payment side of things, totally reinventing it so you don't need to deal with cash or even think about what the tip should be. It's all taken care of for you. Of course, there are trade-offs. So the service is still slightly more pricey than a cab, especially during peak hours when demand for cab rates remain fixed and theirs is fluctuating. So can't have everything. So this is how Uber is differentiating themselves and where they are letting competitors have the advantage. So this tool is a tool called Value Curve, and it's an analysis and communication tool that I find really helpful in talking about these more abstract competitive differentiation models. Now, Uber launched a suite of products that really tie back to these differentiating values well, getting rescued at a moment's notice. They created a brand that has a premium black tie sort of secret service vibe to it, and I think that they did a killer job of communicating the brand through their retail digital products. If you watch someone use Uber for the first time, it's great. People are so impressed watching the little cars that are available swim around their screen. The responsiveness of getting assigned a driver and having their contact information also provides reassurance and trust from the start. And at the end, all the payment is handled by Uber directly, even the tip. It's really beautifully done. So thinking of the other questions that we should be looking at, the missions. How will people find out about it? I found out about Uber through word of mouth because a friend just had to show it to me because he had such a great experience with the product. And that got me to download it. Unfortunately, my first experience with Uber was actually pretty bad because I didn't go through the whole sign-up process. And so when I actually needed a car, I was, had my credit card out, entering details into a dying smartphone at 2 a.m. So not a great experience. Could have been a better scenario. But otherwise, they're doing pretty good. So I'll let it pass. So these screenshots are not from Uber's MVP product. I used Uber as an example because they did such a good job tying this value proposition back to their interface. But these screenshots are actually from version 2.36. So I expect that they've done a good bit of testing and tweaking on the product since their original launch. And that's totally normal. Minor releases happen all the time to make incremental improvements, fix bugs, and add functionality. If you work in-house on a design team, you're very likely to be owning these upgrades, deciding which upgrades to push forward, and making sure that they roll out smoothly. So what research missions should you focus on here? Who is actually using your product? Look for differences between your target users and your actual users. Are certain segments missing? Are there unexpected groups there? Then listen to what they're saying. Find places that people are talking about your product and listen to everything. Check the App Store reviews, forums, set up Google Alerts, collect feedback wherever you can. This is a good way to flag bugs and improve the experience. Try to understand what people like, what's not working, how they're using the product. Listen to them all, but don't immediately jump to change anything based on anyone's comment. First, look at what the data are saying. Get some data to help you make sense of what users are saying and identify the real issues. Who knows, maybe one of the biggest issues with the product is that people aren't even aware of a certain part of the site or the app. So that's not going to come out in user feedback because they don't even know it's there. So that's a big problem that you really want to fix that user feedback isn't going to tell you. So from there, looking at who's actually using the product, what the people are saying, and what the data is saying, your team should be able to come to a consensus of what's going to be important to move forward with. Once you have concepts to move forward on this minor release, some things to consider in evaluating the concept is the feedback being acknowledged. Minor updates are a great way to respond to customer feedback and make sure you should make sure that the response that you're putting out there is recognizable and that you're being responsive and building that relationship. And then the really big one, did anything break? So make sure that the improvement that you're rolling out doesn't have unexpected impact on the key flows. Usability testing is a really helpful way to make sure that conceptually everything is still intact. Now, if you're working on a highly trafficked site, this is a good time to do some A/B testing where you can compare sort of the performance of different options for a concept or the current versus the new proposed design. Amazon is a great example of a company that is always tweaking their products to improve performance. These are just a few of the different configurations of Amazon's famous add to cart feature from the last 5 years. They tweak their site slowly and they test diligently. Every once in a while, I'll get really excited because I'll realize that I'm in one of Amazon's A/B tests. Does anyone else get that? And you're like, oh, I wonder what they're rolling out. I'm a geek. It's okay. So they test the performance of concepts before doing the full rollout to assure that performance won't take a hit with this new concept. And being Amazon, that's a really smart way to operate. So this is a more data-intensive approach than what I typically will rely on. But let's face it, Amazon is pretty excellent with data. They actually own this awesomely named site. If you've never been to this site before, let me introduce you to the other Alexa. It gives you quick stats about web traffic for your site or competitor sites. So, for example, you can see the breakdown of gender, education, and browsing location for people visiting Amazon.com. It's kind of interesting that schools, if you're browsing the internet from a school, there's a greater likelihood that you might be on Amazon than other websites. So I don't know what that means. Maybe someone should look into that. You can also see where in the world people are accessing the site from, what search terms they use to get there, and even what they were doing beforehand. So a word of caution when reviewing this kind of data, quantitative data is great at helping you understand where to look, but it doesn't tell the human side of the story. So use it to understand who you should talk to, what kinds of things you should really focus on, and then go and seek out a more qualitative side of the story to complement it. In addition to the website, Amazon also has apps for Android and iOS. App stores are great places to find feedback and hear from customers. So look closely at the ratings here. According to this screenshot from last week, the Apple app only scores 2.5 stars. And look at all of those one-star ratings. Yikes. So the Android version must be better, right? Isn't that what that's saying? Not exactly. The 2.5 stars is for the most recent release. There might be an issue that needs to be dealt with. Apple provides both the current release and cumulative ratings across releases, whereas Android is really providing the cumulative set overall. So here the Android and iOS versions look much more similar in terms of the rating allocation. Also keep in mind that Apple is showing you reviews only for the country that your iTunes account is hooked to, while Android is publishing worldwide data. So there's some disparities there. If you're trying to make sense of the data, just keep those things in mind. Also, don't just look at the numbers. Do read through the comments for themes and stories to help put the feedback in perspective. I love the top comment. Spyro the Time Lord writes, "Could be better. I pretty much never use the desktop site. I'm still trying to get used to this menu button in that corner. I question the ease of this, but maybe that's because I'm so used to the menu being across the bottom." So this is a longtime user, loves the app, doesn't use the website anymore because he likes the app so much, accepts and acknowledges that change is hard. And as a designer, there's nothing specific to react to here. There could be an issue with the new menu button, but you need to scan through the other 340 reviews for this release to look at the data and decide what action to take. So after you have a solution in hand, test it, make sure you're not breaking anything, and then launch it. Get it out there. Then get started on the next set of tweaks. You're likely to have many point releases before you finally open up your product to a major overhaul. but eventually that's probably going to happen. Unlike minor releases where you're trying to be non-disruptive, here you're going to be disruptive. So make sure that the change is worth it. In many ways, it's like designing for a first release again, because the context surrounding the product may have changed enough that you need to reassess opportunities, positioning, and changes in technology. But you're not starting from a clean slate either. So it's a little bit like launching a minor release in that you want to understand and acknowledge the feedback that you've been getting from your customers. This is often one of the more complex parts of the product lifecycle to design for because of all of these challenges. So what kinds of missions should you really focus on here? I think it's important going in to understand what's at stake. What's at stake if you break it? What's at stake if you don't change? Know what's on the line so that you can make more informed design decisions. By understanding the impact of your design decisions, you'll be able to set yourself up with some better design constraints to make decisions. Looking at analytics, knowing the most trafficked areas of your site or app, and understanding the revenue path and the value exchange. Those are two really critical things to understand before you start moving things around. Next, think about how should we react to the change. So the product context and user behaviors will be changing over time. It's never been a more volatile landscape for digital products. So look for opportunities to evolve. Similar to defining a new product, you're going to have to assess and re-articulate the value in current terms. So what's changed in the marketplace? Have new alternative services emerged? New competitors? Is your product still clearly differentiated? Are there new devices that you need to address? So after understanding these things, your team can strategize and frame the product evolution in a way that makes sense for the near future. Then, once you have that sort of new idea, that evolution sketched up, to evaluate it, you come back to the question, does the design do what it should? Like an MVP product, again, you want to understand, or you want to make sure that the key value and differentiators are clearly coming across. Users should be able to successfully navigate the key flows too. That's pretty important. But in addition to this, unlike an MVP product, you're not working with a clean slate. So there are people already using your product, and you need to consider the new design system through their eyes. Have some empathy for existing customers. What changes might be confusing or exciting to them? Are there new key flows that you need to help them discover? I think Airbnb is an interesting example. They're a bit of an expert at the major release makeover. This was their site back in 2009, not too long after their launch. And you can see that they had the value proposition clearly posted, find a place to stay. They had their tagline at the top, Airbnb, a new way to travel. And they had a very clear, bold call to action to get you started. Where are you going? Also, they showed that they had coverage in 752 cities and 72 countries. Sounds like a lot. Fast forward to 5 years later, and they have 34,000 cities in 192 countries. Wow. So it's safe to say that they're better known now. Their brand has reached sort of verb status, like Google or Xerox. I'm just going to Airbnb it, right? They've removed the tagline, a new way to travel, because now they're just the way to travel for some folks. It's clear that they invested in user experience as a defensive maneuver against potential competitors entering the space. If they stayed with that original site, I expect that someone would have swooped in and provided something better. Stakes were high for them to hold on to the solid market lead while building their brand. Stakes remain high as the world continues to shift. So they must maintain that high bar that they set for themselves moving forward. With the major brand overhaul that they released a few months ago, I think Airbnb made some smart moves to react to marketplace changes. They doubled down on choice as a key differentiator. Here they're leveraging their huge inventory of places to stay by showing options on a map and getting people into their search immediately. So back in 2009, they couldn't have pulled this off. This would have looked like a ghost town. But now, because of the adoption, the change in adoption, the change in the way that people perceive them as a brand, they can do this, and really helps to streamline the experience that users have with the site. For new users, it's still clear that this site is to help you find a place to stay, even if they don't explicitly write it out anymore. For existing users, Airbnb basically just brought the filtering that they're already used to up front, and it's going to feel very familiar and more streamlined. So I think that they did a great job. So as we see with Airbnb, a product can go through multiple major releases in its lifetime, and typically you'll see several minor releases happening between each major release. And now we reach the end. Product retirement sounds a little sad, but it's not really. Retiring a product doesn't mean that you're going out of business. It means that you're making way for new, better products to enter the market. But because you're not going out of business, it's really important that you treat this phase of the life cycle with care so that you stay on good terms with your customers. To retire a product is a design challenge. You have to design and implement the messaging that will support a smooth transition off the product into something else. So what research missions should you focus on here? You want to understand how disruptive will this be. If people have invested time, money, or trust in your product, take this part of the life cycle very seriously. User interviews are a great way to understand the implications of someone going through product withdrawal or potential product withdrawal. How should we break the news? Make note of all of the related touch points that need to be updated to support the removal of this product from your product ecosystem. Service blueprinting is a great way to sketch out the scope of the support that will be needed. You want to understand who will be upset and why. People talk. It's becoming less common for people to sulk in silence. They will post. You want to understand what channels people are going to express their displeasure. What risk does each of these channels expose? How can you mitigate it? Doing an online community audit, looking at analytics, what features are most commonly used, what kinds of comments should you expect. These are all types of things that you want to look at. From here, your team can frame a strategy and a hit list for the product retirement and migrating the audience. So once you have that strategy in place, now you need to understand if you are prepared. Knowing the questions and issues that you'll face as you sunset a product will help you design communications that build stronger relationships. Doing things like workshops with the support team, making sure that they're prepared, making sure that they're bringing the voice of customers they're familiar with into the room, and working through those support scenarios, doing some body storming exercises. Those are great techniques to work with. So let's look at some products that have recently been retired. Who remembers Flappy Bird? So for those of you who don't remember Flappy Bird, this was a game that people found really addictive. And back in February, the developer actually took it out of the App Store because he felt bad that people were so addicted to something he created. The reaction, even though he was making like $50,000 a day in ads, the reaction, people started selling their phones on eBay for large sums of money if they already had Flappy Bird installed. Most product retirement stories don't go off like Flappy Bird. A different story. At the end of June this year, Apple announced that it would be discontinuing Aperture and iPhoto and putting their weight behind Photos, the photo service that's native to iPhones and iPads. So from a business point of view, this makes all the sense in the world. But from a customer point of view, it's going to cause some pain for people that have been using these products. Think of all the time that they've spent creating projects and albums, color correcting. Think of all the baby pictures. This is kind of a big deal. Luckily, there's enough lead time around this product retirement for people to prepare. The Aperture community is sharing tips and creating utilities to help people with the transition. It's a bit of a hassle, but ultimately they'll settle into their new routine as the final release of Aperture slowly becomes incompatible as the world around it gets updated. Now, for someone who's actively following this and making changes to their workflow, no problem. But imagine a recreational photographer who's maybe not as tech savvy. He lets his computer run every update without really reading through the details, and one time he runs a major update, and all of a sudden Aperture no longer works at all. What if he can't get to his photos? So Apple should have a strategy for handling this situation, and I'm guessing that they'll have their geniuses well trained to handle these questions. Their new Photos product might also be well equipped to import photos from these other software that they're retiring. But the moral of the story is you don't want to leave your customers hanging. So that's the product lifecycle. By zooming out from the context of your product, from your project, you can better focus your research and consider the different missions that are important. By using the table on the back of your sheet, you can get some quick ideas for methods that you might want to use. I want to bring your attention to a note in the upper left. This is not a checklist. This is design dim sum. Each of the methods have different cost and time requirements associated with them that you'll want to be sensitive to as you shape a research program to inform your design. I do recommend that you use more than one of these methods at a time. 3 is a good number. There's a sort of research methodology called triangulation, where basically by combining different research methods, it helps you remove the bias that any single method might be placing onto the information you're collecting. So in summary, make your research count. Keep the product lifecycle and your objectives in focus. Choose methods that support the goals you're trying to meet. And be realistic about the resources you have available. Discuss the trade-offs between budget, time, and quality. And that's it. So there is a mic up here in the center. If anyone has questions or comments, I would absolutely love to hear them and answer them. Yes.
Dawn. My name is Mike, but I don't think she was talking about me. Can you talk about the smallest and largest project you've ever researched in this way? I guess I work on a team that does a lot of different things. Some stuff are, it's some websites, which obviously have a longer lifespan, some things that are pretty small. So I was wondering if there's anything you could talk about as far as the size of a project, whether or not something has to have a 20-year lifespan or something that lasts 3 months.
So typically any project that we're working on will only be looking at one of the 5 areas at a time. The research programs that are being shaped can vary from 20 ethnographies and a survey and yada yada to doing a competitive audit and some expert stakeholder interviews, right? So you scale the research program for the project, but typically you're not looking across all of these at once. I think the best example of sort of the most complete product lifecycle that I've seen unfold that I've been involved with is the original ESPN Score Center app. So that was a product that we worked with ESPN to define what makes sense on a mobile phone. What is ESPN on a mobile phone, right? And looking for ways to make it really personal, really focused, really light. ESPN sort of has everything out there in the world. So being able to quickly get exactly what you're looking for in a personal way was a really big part of the initial value proposition of Score Center. And we helped them evolve that core product through several different upgrades. So like rolling out video, rolling out standings, rolling out Gamecast, things like that. And then, eventually it got to the point where their mobile team decided that they wanted to make it be more of a ESPN product and have everything. Now that the processors were at a point where it wasn't as much of a bandwidth issue, it wasn't as much of a processing issue, they could be sort of ESPN on your phone with everything. And they lost a little bit of that personalization. But, it's still in there. And now they've evolved it to Sports Center, so they've totally folded it back in. So it was Score Center, now it's Sports Center. Very subtle. Does that help? Is that okay? Any other questions? 2.
Hi, Alexa. I'm Mary. I'm a graphic designer, and I work in an office of about 30 people. I was really struck by the photos that you have of sort of the team all working together and just a variety of people. I'm not on the leadership side, so I wonder, I'm very impressed by this method. I would like to take back sort of that to my group, but how do you create, or what advice would you give of how do you create a culture in your office environment where people buy into this and they all speak of it, they know the verbiage of how to go about this method? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think Jeff actually gave a lot of good advice in his talk about culture and giving people space to bring their ideas to the table and respect each other's ideas. And I think making sure that you're building a team that is curious and really dedicated to getting the best result, not putting their ego on the line as they have to win. So designers are a lot of people at the moment are pretty competitive, but not in that way, right? We really do want the best product out there at the end of the day. Anything else? All right, I'll be around. I'd love to chat with any of you about any other feedback that you have. And I'm on Twitter, JAlexa. So I'll tweet out the resource links for some good methods books. Okay? Thanks, everyone.